Now we have been doing this process to the original 2 boards that we cut on the miter saw. If we put all of the boards together and we measure the width, I am at about 21 inches. 21 inches is more than 18, and my goal was to have a board more than 18 inches. So what we have right here is perfect to move forward and lay out for glue. Our objective is to create a blank for which we can cut out both of our side pieces. To do that, we need to glue together all 4 of the pieces that we previously cleaned up the edges on. Originally, we had a very wide board, and we ended up cutting that in half. And the reason for that is we want to eliminate the possibility of the board cupping or rocking over time, because we want the sides of our project to be nice and straight, and we do not want them to move on us over the life of the project. Because the growth rings will naturally want to straighten out over time, if we just glue the boards back together in the exact same orientation that they previously were, we would not have solved anything, and we would have basically wasted a day's worth of work. Rather, if we flip the board and rotate it so the growth rings are going in the opposite direction of the piece next to it, the lumber will naturally work against itself to keep these sides nice and straight. So we can see that our growth rings are going down, and the board next to it, the growth rings are going up. If we continue with this process, we want the next board growth rings to be going down, and we want the last board growth rings to be going up. And I recommend drawing the direction that the growth rings are going so you don't get confused as we continue. We also want to take a look at the grain pattern on the face of the boards. So we're going to have a glue joint running along each location that these boards fit together. When they fit together, our grain pattern should line up with each other. Taking a look at my first glue joint, I can't actually tell the difference between where one board stops and where the other board begins. It's very difficult. That is the ideal, perfect situation. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. With our second glue joint, we can see that we have some really wide grain, but then right next to it, we have really tight grain. And that does not look like it flows together, and it's very easy to distinguish that glue joint. My third glue joint, I have some tight grain, but it kind of transitions into some whiter grain. If I spread the board apart, I can see where my seam is, and it actually looks pretty good. It's very difficult to see that glue joint. Now you can mix and match boards any way that you want to, but you always have to come back and take a look at the end grain to make sure that the end grain is alternating up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. One additional thought to consider. I have a nice, good grain pattern. I have a not so good grain pattern in the middle, and I have a nice, good grain pattern on the other end. if I put my quilt rack template on either side, I don't actually need to incorporate that center glue joint in my project, because if you remember, the width of my boards are about 21 inches and I need at least 18. So I have a lot of material to work with. So I'm going to glue it up just like this, and eventually I will be cutting both my left side and my right side away from my center glue joint, and that joint won't even matter for my side pieces. I can end up using the remainder for one of my other components. And then lastly, we need to number each of the glue joints so that when you walk from the workbench back to the glue table, you still know what order the boards go in.